All right. Welcome back to Iron Suits, where strength wears the crown. Today, I've got a man who's had a huge impact on me personally. Is my own coach, Eric Bach. Eric has been training people for what, best part of 15, 16 years, is it now?
Yeah, more or less 2019 or sorry, 2009. Yeah. So
2009.
it is.
Yeah. So like coming on 16, just over 15 years. So he's been training high performance CEOs and athletes to build bodies that actually match the level they operate at in business. And he's known for cutting through the BS, no gimmicks, no shortcuts, just results. And if you ever wondered why so many business owners can dominate the boardroom but still lose the battle against their guts, this episode is gonna hit hard. Eric, welcome to the show, brother. Glad to have you
Thank you
here.
so much. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm honored. I'm honored.
It's
It's been a
gonna
long
be
time coming.
gonna have a good time. All right, so I want to ask you before we go super deep. Um, I've got this like I've got to say my legs still haven't sort of forgiven you for those Bulgarian split squats that you programmed for me. Like I want to give you guys a context for what Eric does. Like the last 2 months we're doing push pull legs and arms. So like not like legs day. He's given me Bulgarian split squats of like 3 sets of 6, 12, 25. So in the first week, I'm like, okay, that's easy. Just do one set of six, one six of like rest a couple of minutes, and one set of 12, and one set of what's it called, 25. That's easy, right? So then I'm like, okay, so like Eric is like, no, that's not right. You made this like 6, 12, 25 on each set. I'm like, bro, are you sure this is right? Like, I've been in like a deep deficit for like the last 2 months. So, like, for context, the first exercise is Bulgarian split squats, 6, 12, 25, 3 sets of each. Like, no rest in between the six on each, and 6, 12, 25. We just keep going. And like by the end of the 25 reps, my quads are like in agony. Then we had like, what was it, 6, 12, 25 on heavy set of RDLs.
Yep.
Oh, I
So you're doing it.
remain
Yeah,
with
that
6,
mechanical
12.
drop set with that. Yeah.
I'm there like trying to do 25 reps, and I'm thinking, right, that, like my back is about to like kind of feeling really like struggling through the rep. And then he gives me the goblet squat where I've got to hold the dumbbell, the dumbbell up here. And then it's like walking lunges and then farmers walks. So by the end, not only my quads are like super like fatigued, but my shoulders are as well. So like I don't know, like do you secretly enjoy torturing your clients, Eric?
You specifically, we're trying to get
I
past that plateau right now, and we're throwing a kitchen sink at you.
I think this is probably the only other time I really sort of like not complain, but like question, like why are we doing something like this when we got out of the cut last year. I was on 1,850 calories. And maybe give me all this volume. I'm like, dude, are you sure like I can do this on 1,850 calories? And like, what, are you scared? I was like, no, seriously, no. It's just like, you know, and I was like in the gym. The gym was like 21 degrees centigrade, not Fahrenheit. And I was like, felt reasonably okay. But then, like when I'm doing the Bulgarian split squats, I'm like, my shirt is like soaked, and I've got a towel right next to me. And I have to go right next to the air conditioning unit to actually cool myself down. I'm like, okay, another set to go. Just keep going. Another set to go.
Yep. Shock phase right now. Shock phase,
Yeah,
and then we're gonna be
yeah.
a little
Like
bit more
by the
reasonable,
end of it, like seriously, like by the end of was it? I'm doing legs tomorrow. By the end of the workout, I get home and I just want to sleep. Like I just want to sit between me and the four walls and not speak to anyone. And I'm like walking, like limping my leg. Like, are you okay? I was like, yeah. It's like, are you sure you're okay? It's like that's not normal. I said, no, that is very normal.
Yeah.
But
This is
believe
not
me,
normal today.
yeah. So, speaking of pain, like let's be real. How can a man who runs a multi-million dollar empire business but still lose the battle against his guts every morning in the mirror?
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is I think of stress as something that's systemic. All the stress we have in life, it all comes to a head and it impacts the entire body. So the stress that we have from business, from relationships, from being unhealthy, from a lack of sleep, it doesn't really matter where it comes for. It still comes and hits you. And where a lot of people find a way to relax is with a cocktail at night, with food at night once the kids go to bed, right? And so for a lot of people, what happens is they push so hard in many of these different areas and they have stress coming from so many different ways. And as fathers, we can relate to this. Like when the kids finally go to bed, you're completely exhausted and wiped. You finally have those couple minutes to yourself. And that's when I see so many men who absolutely crush it professionally will start to lose their standards of operating at night. And pretty soon it's a couple drinks, right? It's an extra dessert. It's all these little things. And pretty soon the weight comes on, right? And it's not just the weight, it's how they feel. It's how they feel incongruent with the person that they want to be, the example that they want to be. And by extension, that's really where it comes. And so much of it to me actually comes down to pulling back and looking at health from a 360-degree view and
Mhm.
think, okay, what do we actually need to work on? Because sometimes it's not just the workout, it's our habits, it's our lifestyle. It's are we proactively reducing stress so we can handle the workload that we do have and then factoring that in? Because when we can reduce that stress, most times we can make better decisions because many times people know that they need to make better decisions. Doing it is the hard part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always like to referring to stress as like a bucket of water where it fills up. And when it fills up to the top, that's when you sort of get like I like to say like it's either sort of when you overstress, you either get like injuries or you get like illnesses. And so they're going to make sure that that bucket of stress is always under sort of control, right?
100%. I was talking to somebody about this, referring back to like playing sports growing up and competing and all this stuff. And every time I had an injury, it was very soon after a personal record, right? It was after being a sprinter, hamstring tear, like 2 weeks after setting a record, right? It was after setting like a PR in a bench press, shoulder injury, right? And it's not that training hard and doing these things at a high level is bad, but it is more stressful, right? The higher up you get, the higher that stressful it becomes. And so it becomes knowing where you have to pull back in different areas of life, right? Not just from a training perspective, but also understanding that sometimes our resilience to stress also shifts as we get older. I'm 36, man. Like I wish I could do all the things I could at 26. I still have the engine to do it, but if I don't factor in, now I've got a bigger business, now I've got a team, married, kids, all
Try
these
being,
things, like
try being 48, bro.
yeah, I know it's coming, man. It's not getting any easier for sure, right?
It's not
And so
easier.
it's and so it's being able to adapt around these different parameters and sometimes take the ego out of it.
That's the one thing which I've really learned. Like before, I think I've told you this before. Where I used to do like barbell complexes. So I used to
Yeah.
go in and do like a set of barbell complexes. And we are like these guys. We are one of these guys who like love this no pain, no gain kind of thing when we are younger. And so I used to go in and do all this and then go in the sauna for like an hour and have low carbs and stuff. And I'm just like, sometimes I even used to go to the gym and just do like a deadlifts. So if I did 120 last week, 120 kg, next week I would go in and thinking, okay, I've got to get 120. And I keep going on deadlift for like 2 hours until I hit like a number, not knowing exactly, like not thinking, that there's a reason why you can't hit that number. And so
Yeah.
that sort of culminated in so many of the issues that I had with my body. And I sort of learned now, like even you told me many times, rather than looking at the actual workout as such, look at the sort of not don't try and just win the workout, try and win the week and the month. And so that's what kind of where I am at the moment. I try and push hard, but not to such a stage whereby I'm thinking, okay, like how should I say it? Like I'll push hard, but not to the stage whereby I'm going to push stupidly hard that I can't recover from.
Yeah. It's don't fatigue yourself so much in the battle that you lose the war.
Yeah, yeah, because that stress, like you mentioned, that stress is also adding to the other stress that you have. So the two go hand in hand together, don't they?
Yes, 100%. And like even referring back to the discussion on your training right now, right? If I would have put a training program on that, like if I would have put that on you when we first got working together, there's no way you'd be able to handle it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And now that we have this experience that we've developed and like this communication and this rapport, we can turn these dials up and we understand what's coming next and we can push it, but it's because we have that relationship and we've built up
yeah,
that tolerance to stress. And what we're doing on the backside of it, we're pulling way back, right? We're doing what's called a strategic overreach.
yeah,
And that's an important concept that people talk about in training sometimes and like some higher level training discussions. You overreach and then you pull back and then your body builds back stronger.
yeah,
Well, for the executive who's out there, think about it. How many times do you have maybe a crazy Q4, right? Q4 is always a busy time. People hitting different goals. They call it Black Friday here in the US because that's when people finally get in the black in terms of a business instead of operating in the red, right? Everyone's pushing their chips to the table. And so if you're a businessman and you're constantly pushing up against these deadlines where you're overreaching, you're not getting sleep, any of these, you also have to factor in times where you pull back or pull back in different areas of your life. Otherwise, you run yourself into the ground.
yeah, yeah. So to give you guys context, like 3 of the days that we're doing are relatively, we say most of the workouts are about 45 minutes, apart from legs day. So legs day is the one that's really hard, but also my stress is under control. My diet is really under dialed in, and everything else is pretty much like under control. So we're able to push harder in the gym. And we'll come to like sort of a tactical thing later on about how we can structure the macros and diet and stuff. But like for somebody who's, like I said, somebody who's like overreaching in other areas of life, then you can't go in and do the stuff that you did when you were younger because the body is no longer able to tolerate it. I spoke before about my eldest who's 18 now. He's in the gym for like 2 hours a day, and like he can go to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning, wake up at 7, and go hit a PR then the same day. And
Yeah,
then they're like, it's like they look at us as though we like, some kind of like, what's wrong with us?
dinosaur.
Yeah, but
Just wait.
yeah, if you don't have anything to do and you like, your mom and dad to drive you over and make you food, then yeah, it becomes like it's easy, you don't have any stress. Your stress bucket is down to the bottom.
Exactly.
Yeah. So most business owners tell me, or they say that they haven't got time to train or eat properly. From your experience, is this really a time issue or is it something a little bit deeper?
I think it's something deeper. It's a lack of systems. And let me
Mm.
give you a business acronym that I operate my business with, but I also teach it to many of my clients when it comes to setting up meals. Automate, delegate, or eliminate, right? We can look at any aspect of business, and there's going to be some aspect where there's automation. There's going to be delegation. So if you're a CEO, if you're an executive, you probably delegate certain tasks to people who work underneath you. And then you eliminate shit that doesn't serve the business. Well, if
Mm.
we operate that same way when it comes to health, think of it this way. Can we automate the decisions we are making in regards to health? Can we delegate the decision making and what we should eat to somebody else? And can we eliminate the things that are trouble? And so the way this works in a practical sense, and I'll give you an example of what I do, and again, this is a business owner with kids, family, schedule, all of this stuff, right? Where I eat the same thing for breakfast. I have a meal delivery delegation for lunch, and I eat the same snack each and every single day, right? So, like, I do not have to think about what I do for breakfast, for lunch, or a workout snack. And then at dinner, I can enjoy it with the family. We can
Yeah,
enjoy some of our favorite foods. I can have a drink every now and then and enjoy myself, right? And so if we think about this, it's 80-20 principle applied and just building better systems. And by building better systems, you remove the need to have to think about all these decisions and you can still build a way build a process that's practical and sustainable for you.
yeah. I was going to come to that because that's exactly the same thing that I do. I have the same meals morning and afternoon, with the exception of the portions. Like for I'll give you guys an example, I'll have yogurt and eggs in the morning with a couple of blueberries, and then in the afternoon, post workout is going to be rice and maybe a little bit of oatmeal and venison. And that's my standard thing. Like you said, automate the decision making. We've got 21 decision points. Yeah, 23 meals a day is 21 decision points a week. So two of those, is it 14 of those I don't have to worry about. In the evening, we can enjoy either going out for dinner or having dinner with the family. As long as it's a protein meal, I don't care what it is. I don't have to worry about it. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm saying 100%, and that's the way that we operate here, and it's the way that we can fit in a lot of our favorite foods and go from there, right? And next week I've got international travel. I'm heading up to Vancouver for some work, and during that time period, okay, I'll eat very light during the day, knowing that there's going to be a business dinner on the back end of it at night, right? So it's about simplifying that decision-making framework so we can just execute the things that matter most.
Yeah. And also when you're sitting the whole day, like in that, like I've been to a few of these masterminds, you sat the whole day and like you don't feel like you really want to eat. Like you can eat, but your brain sort of, or your body doesn't really um like it that much, right? Because you're used to moving around and doing stuff the whole time. And
Yeah.
also, it feels much better when you can go out and enjoy yourself later on with everybody without having to worry about, okay, have I gone over my calories?
100%. 100%.
Here's the thing for you. Like a lot of the guys will find the time to like, time to close the deal or fly across sort of the globe or like handle, check their emails at midnight or go and watch a game, right? Or stay up
Yeah.
and watch the Super Bowl, but they don't have time to schedule in a workout. And that sort of like blows my mind. So is it like a question of priorities rather than time, would you say?
Definitely. And, I understand it from a logical perspective. And, you know, sitting down watching a game that's enjoyable, you turn your brain off, you're not exerting yourself, where you might feel mentally fatigued and not as motivated. However, we got to think second, third order consequences, right? Like the decision to maybe get up and exercise, even when it's the last thing we want to do, it might be unpleasant while we do it, unlike sitting down and watching the game. But the second, third order consequences are better performance, more energy, higher work capacity, probably better presence, setting a better example for your company, for your family, right? And so, much like success in business, we have to think about exercise through that same framework of you probably got where you are doing things most people were not willing to do, right? And you probably got there because you're willing to delay gratification. Well, the
Yes.
same thing is applied to health and fitness. And if we don't, the ultimate sacrifice ends up being our health. And when our health goes downhill, what do you think comes next? It's also
Yeah.
the business.
Yeah. 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 Who's going to pay the bills when you can't work? Yeah. That's
100%.
that's a great one. Yeah. Many of the high level men think that building their body is straightforward as building their business. Like a lot of guys will say, I'll build my business, I can build my body the same way. I'm like I built a business, so I should be able to build my body. But fitness is more of a blue collar game, isn't it? Like you can't outsource the reps, you can't delegate the discipline. Do you think it's more sort of an ego mindset or just ignorance about what it really takes? Like, is there more than just sets and reps?
I mean, in a way, success does come down to the ruthless execution of the basics, doing the basic things incredibly well. And you can look at business from the same perspective. Like you ultimately have to be able to market something effectively. You have to have a good quality product and you have to be able to sell it, no matter what industry it is,
Yeah,
right? Much in the same way, though, fitness has consistent laws that are very simple. And I think where people run into issues is when they go and see fitness content, and we put on our marketing hats for a second, what marketers will try to do is say this is going to be simple, it's going to be easy, and we're going to collapse the time for it. And so naturally, somebody who's time strapped, the human psychology will look for the path of least resistance. And when we take the path of least resistance for exercise, this is where we do, frankly, a lot of the gimmicky bullshit. We do a lot of like it's endless high intensity interval training, or we, buy whatever app, whatever workout going on here, right? And when we're consistently changing what that stimulus is and just trying to confuse the body, excuse me, we never actually build the skill of training. Much like if you were trying to learn sales and you were always changing methodologies instead of actually mastering tonality
yeah,
or the script or any one of these components, right? So we have to simplify, get great at the basic things, and then we can add in different layers. But most people skip that foundational step, and that's why they get into trouble.
yeah. I've seen a lot of people will go into the gym with like different exercises every single time. And like when you ask them about their goals, and like, I'm trying to convince the body without really realizing that the body doesn't really get confused. And when you like, if you're doing so many different exercises every time, like you're never going to really master something. And also, how does it, how is it like, it has an effect on the body, isn't it? Like you're going to be more sore, aren't you? And
Yeah.
therefore, God,
Yeah, you will be more sore if you're always changing things up, but soreness isn't always the goal. And that's where people run into an issue where they chase soreness instead of what is actually going to move the needle forward with the business, right? It's like having a business funnel with a leaky bucket. You're
yeah,
great at acquiring clients and then you can't hold on to them. So you're always having to pump more money into your advertising, right? And so it's a very similar philosophy when it comes to just chasing the individual workout instead of doing things that are really based on principles and going to help you sustain.
yeah. It's funny because like in business they invest in talent systems and like coaching. You know, they'll spend 50 grand on a mastermind because it's the closest thing for that. It's a shortcut, kind of like it's a real shortcut. But in fitness, they'll try and DIY it with like Google and calorie calculators, right? And so that kind of ego sort of blinds them, doesn't it?
Yeah. And again, it's kind of one of those things I totally get. And many of these people, many of these people who are successful in business were probably decent athletes at some point or, had a good body and just things got away from them a little bit. And the reality is, as we change and as we evolve, as our time changes, as our responsibilities change, the way our body responds to things is different. I just had a call with a guy who owns an insurance company yesterday, and he's played hockey for 30 years. And he's like, yeah, every time I go to play hockey now, like, I get hurt. I keep battling the same injuries and coming back through. And what I told him is like, Sean, man, I totally get it. Like, I'm an athlete too. I love to do that stuff, but we have to evolve the rest of your plan around the reality of where your body is now and where your life is now, because you're writing checks that frankly you can't recover from. And that's where the issues really pop up. Right. And it's the same philosophy there where, hey, I'll just run back the same things that I did in school 20 years ago. Well, you can try, but it's probably going to backfire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can control the boardroom full of executives, but one cheesecake at the dinner table, and that completely owns you. So, how does a man have so much authority in business lose all this discipline with his body?
It could be a number of things. One of them is, most people have some vice in some form, right? And many times it's food becomes that relaxation component, which kind of ties into the stress of it all. And I mean, I'll even take this from a different angle. It's not that you can't have the cheesecake, but it's like you have to be able to make adjustments with everything else
Yeah.
around the cheesecake. And so again, I'll be traveling next week and I'll be at business dinners. I know there's going to be steakhouses, desserts, like all of that good stuff. But what will I do? Well, earlier in the week, knowing that that's coming up, I'll probably pull back on my calories a little bit, right? That same day, I'll make sure I get a workout in. That dinner, I might pull back in a few other things if I know I'm going to have that dessert, right? Much like in a business, you're probably balancing withdrawals and deposits in terms of cash flow. That's how calories work as well. And so we can't just keep making withdrawals, withdrawals, withdrawals and expect to be where we want to be. And that's where a lot of people operate with food. And so sometimes it's a situation of if you plan ahead of time, great, you can fit those things in seamlessly, but you have to be proactive in what that looks like.
You got to know your numbers ahead of time.
100%. Data eliminates drama.
Yeah, this is the thing. A lot of people, a lot of these guys will know their numbers, like their P&Ls and their profit margin and like a balance sheet, and but then when it comes to their body, they completely like, they completely kind of expect do things on the fly, thinking that it's a different game, and that really like blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things, man.
Yeah. I want to talk about coaching because both of us have got coaches. You've got a business coach, I've got a business coach, and we both have fitness coaches. You've got a fitness coach as well, even though we're both coaches and we know what to do. So most business owners think I'm already an expert. I shouldn't need a coach. And like I mentioned earlier, these guys track all their KPIs, metrics, and down to the decimal. But when it comes to their body, they guess. So why is there such a disconnect? Why do the men who don't wing it in business like wing it with their health?
I think there's an ego aspect of it because a lot of times training and whatnot is inherently masculine. You get a lot of alphas who are in business as well. And so they apply that same mindset, which I get it. I'm wired that same exact way. The difference, I believe, though, with coaching is really what it helps you do is it identifies your blind spots. Much like people have blind spots in their business, which is why they might have a board. They might have people with different opinions are going to be able to highlight something that you might not consider. and that becomes incredibly valuable. The same thing when it comes to being a coach, right? For me, man, like there are some aspects where I just need someone to get after my ass a little bit. Just the reality of it. I know what to do, but am I getting it done by myself? Truly, no.
Mm.
And so a lot of people think they know what to do, yet when they look in the mirror, that's not what the actual picture says, or it's not what the balance sheet says. And so the reality is it's a results based world, whether business or whether it's fitness. And so if you're not getting those results, you probably don't either know what to do as much as you think. Sometimes that's a hard truth. Or your follow through and the lack of accountability is leading you to do things that are incongruent with the goal. And from one guy to another, there's no worse feeling than making a promise to yourself or somebody else and breaking it. Yes, there's no better feeling than making a promise, making a hard goal, and accomplishing it, right? And so it comes down to being willing to be open to criticism, to being open to having that extreme accountability, but the reward for it is feeling like you're fully in alignment with who you want to be and performing your best.
Mhm. Yeah, the accountability aspect is a big one because like we like every Friday we do check-ins and I send you the photos. Even though like how should we say it? Like we you have I've told you my goal and you push me towards that goal. Like if I went 1 week where my calories, I send you a screenshot of my calories. From 1 week where my calories are like not as good as they should be, you'd be like, hey man, what's going on? Or my step count, or my like the workouts. Like when I was doing the 6, 12, 25 on Bulgarian split squats, I was like, I was gonna make up a number, and Eric went no. And then I was like, no, because your subconscious already knows, right? Your subconscious knows you're not really doing something, you're not in congruence with what you're trying to
Yeah.
achieve. And so that kind of thing is not gonna, it's not like you don't feel like you feel as though, like you said, you account you're letting that person down. And so
Yeah.
that's a big one because a lot of the time the environment doesn't really support it, does it? The environment that you're in doesn't support the goal
No.
that you want.
Have another drink. Just live a little bit.
Yeah.
All these little things, which I get too. I mean, hey, I've got friends, I've got colleagues who like to get after it, and not saying I'm perfect either, but it definitely it's something where it provides that extra layer of accountability. And I can't recall what the actual term something effect, but when we do know that somebody's observing what we do become more conscious of whatever that habit or behavior is, and we
Mhm.
typically start to course correct. And that's a very big change for a lot of people when it comes to coaching.
I'm always thinking when I'm doing the Bulgarian split squats, I'm thinking, okay, Eric is watching you now. You gotta do them. You gotta do them. Uh, I keep referring back to the Bulgarian split squats. I think I mentioned it earlier. A lot of these guys, so I want to touch a bit more on it. A lot of these guys rely on generic advice like Google, YouTube, and calorie calculators. But a lot of these guys still look average as fuck, even after training for like 10 plus years. Why does this fail these high performers specifically? Why is it that they go to these generic free stuff, whereas in business, they go after the thing that's going to make them more money. They happily spend the money on business, but when it comes to their body, they take shortcuts.
Yeah. So naturally, what people are doing in a situation like this and like what they're trying to figure out is like if I piece together these different parts of the puzzle, maybe I can figure this out on my own, right? And if we think about that from a business perspective, that's like talking to a competitor and just having like tip here, tip there without an actual foundation to bolt it on, right? So, for example, or we could even use investing as the example. Let's
Mhm.
say that you've been, reading different blogs about cryptocurrency, but you're towards the back end of your career and you're actually more concerned about preserving wealth than building new wealth. Well, if you change your structure and all of a sudden now you're taking 70, 80% of the money that you're investing and you're doing it in, high risk meme coins and different types of cryptocurrency, that's going to be pretty out of alignment with what stage you're actually in, right? And so what a lot of people end up doing is, yeah, they start collecting these tips and these ideas and these strategies, but they're not relevant for where they are in that journey. And so they gain this idea of like, well, I know what to do. I know what I need to be doing in terms of eating, nutrition, and working really hard, but I'm not getting a payoff, right? And so the truth is, what it comes down to, it's a lack of a plan that's actually built for you and for your lifestyle, something that meets you where you're at and also challenges you to go above and beyond where you are. Because when you first get started, say if you start training in 18, 20, 22, you can do just about anything and you're going to see progress because it's such a new and novel stimulus.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most people never get beyond that. And that's when they start to enter like this try random shit phase. And that's why they get stuck feeling like they're not making progress, or they get really bought into what they did at one stage and they fail to adapt, and then end up getting hurt.
Yeah, 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 exactly. It's mind blowing. They're applying like cookie cutter tactics to something that needs to be bespoke level because, like I said, everybody's different. Like everybody's genetics are different. Well, I don't really want to say genetics, but everybody's lifestyle is different. So if you're trying to do like a workout from like Chris Bumstead, and that's like designed for a guy who's able to handle that kind of thing. And then you wonder why you don't get anywhere. Well, that's the reason because it doesn't really, it's not applied to your, it doesn't work for your lifestyle, so to speak. So I want to get tactical here. How should someone set up their macros and calories if somebody who's the one to get maximum fat loss? And also be able to sustain the performance both in the gym, in the boardroom, the not both, gym, boardroom, and the bedroom. Should they aim to build muscle first, or should they try and burn fat first and then build muscle later?
Yeah. So from a tactical perspective, what most people come in saying is, hey, I want to lose fat and build muscle. Well, we have to understand that those are two opposite sides of the paradigm, right? So, for example, yes, if you lose fat,
Hmm.
your body can build muscle more effectively because we improve things like insulin sensitivity, typically a better testosterone to cortisol ratio. And if we build muscle, yes, we increase our calorie expenditure and can burn more even at rest. But what we have to understand is building muscle is 4 times slower than fat loss. And if we have too much body fat and we try to build muscle, guess what? Your body's going to be so inefficient that it's going to end up just building as much fat as it is muscle. And then it's going to be so slow that you get frustrated by what the process actually is, and then you start to change strategies, right? So, what the optimal strategy is for people is to go all in on fat loss. Most guys, they'll have probably an additional, frankly, 10 kgs more to lose than they think that they do. It's a very humbling thing, right? Even as somebody who's been single digit body fat for
I
photo
can,
shoots,
I can relate.
yeah,
Yeah,
it is, and you're like, oh my god, I feel small. I see this number on the scale, right? And it's again, it's kind of a mind fuck. But the reality is, most of us have a lot more body fat than we think we do. We want to get to 12 to 15% body fat, so that's when you're going to have at least some abdominal visibility on the top couple abs. And if we get to that point, yes, then we can start to actually build muscle a bit more effectively. I think a lot of people, chase what they see on social media and these like huge, like doped up influencers who are massive and lean. That's not practical or sustainable for most people. But more of an ideal, and this is still like an elite physique, but like an ideal look would be like maybe a middleweight UFC fighter or boxer. Like that's more the actual structure that most guys have.
yeah,
Right. And so it's, yeah, get leaner first, get to the point where you're healthy because your blood profile, your energy levels, mitochondrial health, all of that stuff is going to be in a much better place. Focus on getting lean. Right. If you get there and then you feel like building muscle, great. Just understand that the muscle building process is 4 times slower. Fast progress for somebody who's an intermediate would be, half a kilo a month. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but then you get to the end of the year and you're up 6, 7 kilos. Like that's pretty substantial. Think about
yeah.
that in terms of stakes that you're holding on to. It's a lot of stake. So that would be the process or like the overall structure. Now, I would have to think about um, you know, what it would be in terms of kgs and how we would set this up. So bear with me here. But like a lot of times that I would start somebody out would be 10 to 12 times their body weight in pounds, right? So if somebody was, 100 kgs, so 220, right? We'd be talking 2200-ish 2,200 calories a day, right? That would be where we'd want to be. Now, what you might want to structure that as is actually go a little bit lower, go like 10% lower because most people are off by what they track by 10 to 15%, right? That's where the human aspect comes in beyond what you see in a research study. And beyond that, what we want to be at is around a gram a pound or a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So half a kilo basically. 0.82 or is it 0.62? 0.82 grams per pound of body weight is like kind of the upper limit for protein synthesis. And what we want to be in that level because what that's going to help us do, yes, build muscle. It's going to help us preserve muscle when we're in a cut. It's going to help us feel full and satiated. And by extension of that as well, 30% of the calories that we consume from protein are actually burned off. So, you know, once we get to that, we've got our calorie set, we've got our protein set. The beautiful thing here is you could go either high carb or high fat. I prefer a higher carbohydrate approach because it's better for buffering stress for most people. But as long as you hit your calories and protein, you can be flexible with the way that that works.
Yeah, a lot of the guys will start off with like a massive calorie deficit, and they end up hitting a wall halfway through and then wondering why their stuff doesn't work, because like they back themselves into a corner or into a wall where their calories cannot go any lower because they're literally starving. And so then, like you said, they start throwing all these strategies into the fire, right? All these punch of wood in the fire trying to do something, and their body is just like fighting back, saying, no, 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 I'm not having any of it. So how low is like too low? Can somebody like how long, if somebody goes in below 10 to 12, say they do like 8 times their calories in the hope of trying to get lean real quick, how long
Yeah.
how long is that going to be before the body will start thinking, hold on a second. Like
So yeah,
these guys who are real busy, it's going to be like a lot quicker than the average person, isn't it? Because they have a lot of stuff on their plate. And so when they're under fueling, then it's going to
yeah.
catch on to the other areas in life, isn't it?
It is. So the more body fat somebody has to lose, the more aggressive they can be with a diet because they will use some of that fat that's stored as energy. If you look at studies that dig into this a little bit more, and this was more angled towards like college athletes who are looking to perform, but I think it still gives us a pretty good barometer where if you're at a calorie deficit that's 30% or greater below your baseline, your maintenance calories, in about 4 to 6 weeks, we start to see metabolic adaptations, right? So what we see is we start to move less throughout the day, right? We can start to see some down regulation potentially in terms of thyroid. We see increases in cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone. And then what happens when cortisol, your stress hormone, goes up? Well, your cravings go up. Your number of fucks that you give about making the right decision,
Yeah, yeah,
no, those go down. So like you have cravings. Now you don't care as much, so you're going to be more likely to splurge. Your thyroid is suppressed, so you're burning a few fewer calories, and your insulin sensitivity, how well your body handles carbohydrates, is also down, right? So if we diet too aggressively and do it too long, in addition to a high stress environment, that's where so many people run into walls, and that's where people run into, frankly, metabolic and hormone issues long term, where they diet super aggressively and then it swings right back up and they gain more fat than they lost.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I want to add this for the guys listening. Like, it can't starve you way lean and still perform at a high level. And that's why so many of these crash diets, like you said, don't work, because it's just it's they set you up for failure, basically, don't they? These
They
crash
do.
diets set you up for failure because they're built. It's like they got a built-in mechanism that you're going to fail, and then you're going to go back and try another diet. It's like a never-ending loop, like a hamster on the Ferris wheel.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not that you can't do short-term aggressive diets, but what you have to do is you have to know how to pivot out of them. Most people don't, right? So like you can be pretty aggressive, yeah, for maybe 4 to 6 weeks, but on the backside of that, are you trying to push it harder? Because it's only going to backfire. And so sometimes what we'll do is like, yeah, we'll do aggressive phases for sure. And then what we do, we pull back in the training volume, the intensity, and we increase calories. We give the body a break, right? We sprint, we pull back. We sprint, we pull back. We sprint, we pull back.
Yeah, you can't go full pelt forever.
You can try, but it's not pretty.
Not going to work. Your body's not machined. So, Eric, many of these guys have tried things like PTs, challenges, 75 hard bullshit, fitness retreats, but nothing is stuck. Why do you think these things don't work long term?
I think many of these things are very intense, and with that intensity comes a lack of long-term consistency and sustainability, right? So you can take a lot of people and put them in a very aggressive diet for 30 days, right? You see it all the time with, I'll use, ketogenic or carnivore diet, right? A lot of people will hop onto that. And it can be very beneficial for a short period of time. But are they never going to eat any of those foods again? Because what happens when most people take on these things that are very aggressive in one way, they are naturally an all in or all out type person. Many people in business are. And so what happens after they get to that 30 days or that 75 hard days? They go right back to where they were because now they're all the way off and then they spiral down. And so what I think is a better approach. It's like understand that about yourself and then focus on a plan. Like what are the things that give you fulfillment that maybe are not perfectly in alignment with eating the best diet in the world? And can we work those things in a practical and sustainable way? You know, for me, right? Like I've got pizza night with the family every single week. Typically I might have a couple drinks each week. I've got ice cream dates with my daughter typically every single Wednesday, right? Because these things are fulfilling, they're enjoyable. Could I take them away and get leaner? Yeah. Might I do that once every now and then if I'm trying to get dialed in professionally for a photo shoot? Sure, but it's a very short term thing. And if I overly restrict, what happens is that I kind of go off the deep end with it. And that's what happens with the vast majority of people. So think about what you can do when life is chaotic and not when circumstances are perfect and you're extremely motivated, because you won't always be.
And that's the thing. People try and do these things. They don't like that when they think of the idea of fat loss, they like give up every single thing with their life, every single thing they enjoy, and then end up being back to square one. They think it's them. They don't like they lack willpower or they lack discipline. When the actual fact is their systems don't work. And the fact is with 75 hard, and I've mentioned it plenty of times on my Facebook that it's like 75 hard is 365 soft because there's no point doing something for 75 days and cutting out steaks and whiskey, which is the only thing that makes client dinners tolerable.
Yeah.
Sake of 75 days, it's like, what's the point of doing it for 75 days? Like, oh, to wear this badge of honor on your shirt to say that I've done 75 hard, or to put this badge on your Facebook or Instagram handle to, calendar to say that with the tick that I've done 75 hard. Like we can do we can do 75 hard, or we can do 365 where like I'll, I'll rephrase it. I could do 75 hard without a problem, but it's not enjoyable. Right. I'd much rather have days where I'm able, like I said, to have pizza, go out to birthday parties and have ice cream, go out on holiday and have ice cream or have burgers, rather than being stuck with doing these, silly challenges for 75 days, just to say that I've done hard shit and then and the end of it, like being the look the same after day 76, 77. Unless that is you want to do the sort of like less 75 hard for the whole year, in which case you're on some next level crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Um, so for the guys that lose 30, 40 pounds, I'm sure you worked with a lot of these that lose 30, 40 pounds and see their abs again, like beyond the mirror. What does this transformation do for their business, their marriage, their leadership, and their ability to be like the relationship with their kids as well?
Yeah. So I think the biggest transformation comes internally because it's about setting a standard and doing things that are in alignment with the person that you want to be. And that's going to build your confidence. And that confidence, that's probably what your wife is finding attractive, not just your pocketbook, right? It's that confidence of how you carry yourself. It's the fact that you are somebody who's displaying traits that are trustworthy and reliable and taking care of yourself so you can take care of everybody else. So that's one huge piece of it. By extension, when your kids don't always listen to what we say, but they will model what we do, good, bad, and different. That's something I've really thought about since I became a parent, and something that I also reflect back on in terms of growing up as well, right? Like, I started getting into exercise because my dad would come back. My dad was an engineer. He would come back and he would go to the dojo. He's always in martial arts, and then I would see him like stretching on the floor and doing push-ups. And so what would I do as a little boy? I want to be like dad, right? So I start doing those different things, and that's was really cool. Now, if kids see dad sitting on the couch, exhausted, exacerbated on his phone, drinking 2 glasses of whiskey because he's exhausted, that's going to be something else that they're also going to see as well. They might model it subconsciously. So there's that aspect for sure. And then I just think so much of it's around elevating your standard from one man to another. We automatically will when we see somebody else who looks like they take care of themselves, like there is like an innate primal respect for that individual. Even if
Yeah,
it's just like, holy shit, that guy's jacked, right? It's just like, oh, that guy takes care of himself, right? Like you'll get offhand comments like that. It's not that the reason any of us really train, but they'll be like, oh yeah, you take care of yourself. And there's an instant respect that is built there because when somebody is taking care of themselves, it shows that they have the capacity to probably take care of you as well. Versus if somebody walks in with a schlub, like a schlub with poor confidence, shirts untucked, and they look sloppy, that's
yeah,
also sending a message. They could be the smartest guy in there, but that first impression, it matters. We're primal.
yeah, yeah. Your body speaks before you do. Like you walk into the boardroom with the gut hanging out and like waddling in, and your shoulders are like slouched. People are gonna think like, oh, okay, this guy's telling me to like do this and do that. Yeah, he can't even keep his hands off the cookie jar. Like, why should I listen to him?
Yeah, no doubt. And when it comes to, like I said, when it comes to at home, like, listen, there's a reason that the women are, fawning over Chris Hemsworth and Thor. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
like drooling over Fat Bastard and Austin Powers.
That's the thing that the people don't think about it differently. Like their wives will look at them differently, right? And hold them different as well. And the relationship, like especially in bed, will improve because they've improved.
Yeah, they're excited about it, and even from a physiological perspective, like listen, you got better health, better blood flow, all of that. It matters. It matters.
It's beyond just aesthetics, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, beyond just a mirror. Yeah. Tell me something. Biohacks, TRTs, peptides, like all these high performing guys have thrown money at these shortcuts before they even master the basics. Is that optimization, or do you think that's just like expensive toys for men who just don't want to face the truth?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? And so I think in some ways people will say, can I start taking Semorlin, a peptide which can be shown to improve, growth hormone release, which can accelerate fat loss, improve sleep and recovery, right? Well, have you mastered everything else that's actually going to help improve sleep and recovery first? Have you making those things a priority? Now, in some cases, for people, they have so much going on in their schedule that it might be 6 hours that they can get, just truly speaking of it. But are they getting the best quality 6 hours that they can? Are they doing a stress reduction? Are they taking magnesium? Do they have a lot of these things going on? And I think it's always important to do things as naturally as you can and build up those foundational things. And then if something is not correct, right, and you're doing blood work, you're checking everything out, then that's open to having a conversation about, what that looks like to layer these things in. Otherwise, what happens, I'll use testosterone as the example. And speaking as somebody who is on TRT and have done blood work for 11 years now to kind of check where my levels have gone,
Yeah.
for me, it was a personal situation where it was like, cool. Like, I had some symptoms and, more or less it's kind of adrenal burnout from just pushing too hard. So I'll probably all relate to that to some extent. And I took a serious, like, year and a half where I was like kind of considering doing some of this stuff to improve all these different health biomarkers and just retesting to see if we get things to improve. Things didn't. So at that point, it was like, okay, cool. And again, this is coming from somebody who was in really good shape and still dialed in with a lot of other things. It wasn't in the cards. But what I see with a lot of people is they don't want to address their sleep. They do not improve their diet. They do not train regularly. They're like, yeah, what if I just hop on some testosterone? Well, is it going to have an impact? Yes. But what we have to understand is if we don't take care of all of the other stuff that actually supports healthy testosterone levels naturally,
Yeah.
that's where the scary symptoms come in, right? That's where the issues come in. You worry about the widowmaker heart attack and all of these different things that can be potential side effects for, hormones and, peptides. We don't really know.
A lot of these things, like you say, are shortcuts, but they don't work as well. The only way they're going to work more effectively is if you do everything else properly. Like even though some people are on TRT, they still look average as fuck. Even though they're like on TRT, yeah, they might look a little bit bigger than they were, but they
Yeah.
still don't look anything different. The guys I don't know, this is gear as well. It's like you still need to eat a proper amount, still need to get your sleep, you still need to optimize your program. Like you're not going to inject this stuff in and then suddenly you can become like a Chris Bumstead or what's it called, Dorian Yates or any of these guys. Like, even though these guys are on this stuff, they've optimized everything that they need to do. Like in your case, you're like, you've been like I said, you know, you've been in shape for, well, since you were, you're an athlete before, weren't you?
Yeah, and like I've started doing like photo shoots and all that stuff, or single digit body fat, and like flying up to New York City when I was like 25. And so
Yeah.
that stuff's really tough on your body to get that lean and do some of that. And so like we think that was part of the issue that's kind of led to issues, kind of now. But it was having that foundation of having a lot of those things dialed in. And unfortunately things didn't prove to the way that we wanted. So we made a decision to kind of went from there.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is like you gotta be 100% sure that this is for you rather than just taking it as a shortcut because I think I'm not an expert, but once you go down that route, then there's no coming back, is there?
So it's something interesting, right? So obviously the dosage depends on a lot of things that you do. Um, right. And so we talk about fertility as the example, right? So we have one kid, my wife and I were kind of on the fence. Do we want to have another one? And so with TRT, yeah, that's something you have to consider because once you start something like that, you have spermogenesis, so where your body can still, naturally produce sperm, so on and so forth. But got about a 70 to 75-day window before that starts to shut down when you introduce exogenous testosterone. Now you can take something else called HCG, which kind of more or less keeps your testes alive. And that can be something that keeps that fertility there. When people don't do that, sometimes, yeah, then the engine is shut down. So in terms of like having kids, that's something to consider, right? And can you start to get some natural testosterone, like kind of going back up in the future? Yeah, but it can be a long, uncomfortable road where you're going to feel like absolute dog shit, right? And so it's not a discussion to take lightly. And unfortunately, all over the U.S. over here, it's like got men's health clinic absolutely at every single corner where people are just handing out testosterone like it's like it's candy, right? And so there is a lot of considerations to do. And then yes, there's also the dosage, right? And so for me, actually just got my initial blood work back, and my levels are 895, right? The natural physiological range is like 300 to 1,000, right?
Mm.
I was 900 when I was 25, 26. So I'm
Wow.
actually just kind of put myself back to where I was. I'm not taking a super maximal dose being at 2,000 like, I'm a pro bodybuilder. Now, is it still an exogenous substance? Yeah. Would I consider myself fully natural at this point? No, because I'm introducing a substance, but I'm also not in a full steroid cycle, right? And so because of that, there's less inherent risk and some of those other aspects that you would want to consider.
Meanwhile, I'm still waiting for you to invent and peptides so I can inject it and skip those Bulgarian splits
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
yesterday.
exactly.
Uh, all right, so let's talk ROI because these guys love love numbers. So they track a return on every the CEOs track returns on every single investment, but the one asset that drives everything, their body, gets ignored and it's until it's too late. What's the real cost of staying soft when you're supposed to be the sharpest man in the room?
You know, it's almost hard to quantify. But if we think about it this way, when we are healthier, when we're leaner, when we're exercising, we are improving brain function, right? We are able to synthesize more neurons. We have better memory consolidation. We release more BDNF inside of our brain, right? So by being unhealthy, we are, by extension, not mentally functioning as best as we can. And so that could be one small decision here, one small decision there. And if we think about it from a compounding effect, if we think about compounding interest, right, it starts like this, and then the wealth dramatically hockey sticks. The
Mhm.
same thing. Small decisions that maybe aren't as good as they could be, not performing at your best, maybe not a big issue until it is, right? And so that's one of the hard things that happens with health and fitness is most guys will wait until they have a holy shit event, right? They have a heart attack, they have something like that before they want to maximize it. Meanwhile, everything else has suffered because they've been pushing so hard, maybe for a professional or a financial goal. And so it really takes that perspective. And so, can you quantify on how much that is? No, but I can tell you there have been so many times that I've had clients who have gotten into better shape and pretty soon have gotten a promotion. They've closed the biggest deals of their life, right? Coincidence? Maybe. Doubt it.
It's that subconscious thing, isn't it? That subconscious confidence that they have, the way they carry themselves, the way they speak, the way they move, and it applies to every area of their life, doesn't it? Because we keep saying, or you keep saying, that fitness is a force multiplier.
Yeah, it's conviction, right? Think about somebody in sales. The person who has the most conviction, who can transfer the most trust from one person to another, is probably going to get the deal.
Yeah.
How do you have more conviction and, frankly, confidence? Well, when you're in the gym, you're building that confidence, you're building that self conviction each and every single day.
Yeah, it's like in sales, the person who's got more conviction is going to convince the other person to invest or buy their product.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So for the CEO who says, I'll get in shape once business slow down, once my kids grow up, etc., insert any other excuse, what's your gut response to that?
Take a second and step back and ask yourself, when has life slowed down? I don't know about you, but 36 is busier than 34, then 32, then 30, then 28, then 26. My responsibilities go up, right? The amount of things I have to do go up, and energy to everything else goes down. The only way we can get more energy to handle it is by making it a priority now. And so we can either keep deferring and waiting until things get less busy, which they won't, or we can build a skill set to be healthier now, to be more resilient to stress now, to be higher performing now, and build a skill set to handle whatever life throws at us next. And so, yeah, you can defer it, you can kick it down the road, but it's only going to get harder, and you're only going to pay that hidden cost more. I like to call it the ignorance tax, right? Every time that we are not getting closer to that particular goal, it's costing us a difference in our performance. Think about it financially. Let's say you want to get to $10 million a year and you're at eight. Every year not getting to that $10 million where you are currently at eight, it's costing you $2 million. Think of it that way, because there is a cost.
Yeah, it's a cost, if not now, then later. I always like to think of the biggest companies that started in the last recession. Is it Uber, WhatsApp, and a couple of other companies? Like, if you can't handle the pressure now, that like, what makes you think that you're going to handle it when things get a lot harder? So when you start at the time when you're less busy or you got less responsibilities, you're basically assuming to your subconscious that you are gonna stop again when things get more busy, right? So the best time to start
100%.
is when you are less busy, when you are very busy, and so then get strong. When and then when the time that you're less busy, then you can sort of coast rather than be fighting through.
100%. Because that's a lie that most people tell themselves that led to the issue in the first place. And so they are therefore creating the same exact circumstance that led them to be out of shape in the first place.
All right, my man, this is gone. We've gone past 10 o'clock. I know you got to shoot. That was epic, man. That was really cool. Thank you very much for joining me. And for the listeners who want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, head over to Instagram at Bach Performance, BACH Performance. Not sure if I'm related to the composer or not. Had some adoptions on that side of the family. So Johann Sebastian Bach, not quite sure, but hit me up over there. Otherwise, you can head over to bachperformance.com. Feel free to drop me a message on either one of those platforms. I'm more than happy to chat with you and serve you any way that I can.
Sounds good, brother. We'll put those in the show notes.
All right, much appreciated. Thanks for having
All
me.
right. Thank you very much for coming, Eric. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.